Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. So, let's talk deck builders. Do you like deck builders? They're personally one of my preferred favorite mechanisms, if you will, whatever you want to put. I enjoy deck building and all that comes with it because deck building is just something unique. And we're going to talk about For Glory here behind me. A two-player head-to-head deck builder now trying to release an expansion called Champions. It increases it now to 3 and 4 player, and for all of you solo people out there, you can solo play with this game as well. So, that being said, knowing my own personal preferences, what are my thoughts on For Glory? Let's talk about it, and let's hopefully give you enough information to find out whether or not you would enjoy it as well, or if it's just a game that isn't right for you as well. Let's talk. Let's jump over to the Kickstarter page here just for a second so you get a little bit more of a gist of what this game is before I go into what you actually need to know, how well it works, and whether or not it's for you in terms of pros and cons. This is the campaign, Champions expansion with a second printing of For Glory. And if you know anything about my channel, I do a weekly Kickstarter roundup where I talk about everything that has launched almost. And I have probably looked at more Kickstarter pages in the last year and a half than probably anyone, maybe Alex from Board Game Co., anyone else. And so I talked about it. I said deck building, I like that. How do you do a deck building 1 versus 1? I'd have to try it before I buy it. And so Spielcraft actually saw my video and they said, you know what, here, try it. And let us know what you think. So they sent me a copy of the game, and I've been playing it, and, obviously I'm going to give you my thoughts. But, this is a very unique thing. I can't think of another game that does the deck building head-to-head like this. First thing you probably need to know about this game is it's going to be a little bit heavier than your average deck builder. It's not going to be as light and breezy, and it's going to have a lot more meaningful decisions. As weird as that sounds, and as weird as I feel saying that from a deck builder where you're shuffling up your cards at the end of every draw pile and having to just randomly get them. But because of that mechanism, it makes you feel like the decisions that you are making are more important on a turn-by-turn basis. Now, this expansion, the Champions expansion, is adding some hybrids, adding these champions that are going to upgrade, adding the solo mode where you're going to be going against this Ludus Magnus, independent gladiators that are going to grow stronger as you get more glory. And again, what do you actually need to know about the base game itself? This is where the really interesting aspect is. The core of this is deck building, right? You have your hand, you're paying your money, you're buying cards. I mean, Chris, what are you talking about? This is nothing unique. Well, the thing with this is that the mitigation, the thing that sets it apart is the two-phase actions that they talk about, where you're deck building going through your regular turn, and then you have the potential to initiate a battle should the circumstances be right, based on the amount of gladiators that are now in play. And that's the difference. And also the battling, which we'll talk about here as well, sort of sets it apart in terms of a strategy as well as a very tactical nature. And we'll talk about all this other stuff. We'll talk about the interaction. We'll talk about the components. And I just want to give them a shout out, though. The rulebook was okay. It was okay. It wasn't the best rulebook. It wasn't by far the worst rulebook I've read this week, even. But this how to play video right here, super succinct, super good. I want to give them credit for doing their own how to play video, which worked well, which again isn't widely done in this realm of things. Playthrough video, great. So here's all the new content: upgradable champions, blessings that prevent damage, hybrids that are scheme tactic reactions. We'll get into that in a minute. And just more cards, more multiplayer, more solo. Okay, so let's get back to my final thoughts. You can look at the rest of this page yourself. So what I think of it, what are some of the pros? First up, this is a good game. Those quotes, you know me at this point, if you've watched my videos, Kickstarter quotes tend to be over-generalized, over-hyped. What I can say, though, is this is a very solid game. If you like deck building and you do not find it fulfilling enough and you wish there was more depth to it, more nuanced decision making as opposed to empty my hand and go on to the next turn, this is going to give it to you. Now, the two-player aspect, we are used to deck building in the majority of games as being cooperative. Now, this head-to-head changes it up a bit. And the nature of that is kind of refreshing at the same time. Though I will say, for my wife, who is not as experienced and not as interested from that side of things in gaming as a whole, and she will play anything that I will put out, but this was a little bit much for her. She did not like some of the aspects because there was more to it. 3 succinct, different piles you're buying from, drawing from, manipulating, able to look at and see what's going on in terms of the schemes and the tactics, or the influence of the money cards, and then the gladiator cards. And that is besides the hand management itself, because, as I said, deck builders tend to just be, I'm going to play all these cards, and then, yeah, whatever, just get rid of the rest. There's some actual management, because the tactics cards that you're drawing are really only going to be good for when the arena goes, but the arena may not go anytime soon, and so you may be discarding these cards to the nether regions, unable to get them when you truly need them, because those tactics cards are huge. The gladiators are not that powerful comparatively sometimes, and the tactics cards are a huge swing potentially, in a good way. Not like massively OP and, take things completely, out of context one way or the other, but in a good, wow, game-changing ability moment to rescue you from the depths of defeat, if you will. And the clever tactic or mechanism that they use is, well, based on the numbers of the gladiators that are out there, it may trigger the battles to initiate, but only when it's the person's turn who is behind goes. Which again helps mitigate things instead of a runaway leader. And the whole fact, again, as a positive, that when you win battlefields, you get bonuses for those battlefields. If it's the lasting one, you actually get to physically take the battlefield, put it into your repertoire, and be able to use it. Whereas the other battlefields get manipulated either back or forth, depending on if you win it or lose it that round. It's clever. And again, the best thing about it is it works. Because you have decks of cards that are this thick, of a wide variety, of this one being the wealth and the money cards for that instance. And so there is not the concern about, oh, well, this is going to be samey. Again, the gladiator deck is bigger than this one. And that's refreshing, especially in a base game. Like, that's the biggest problem with a game like this that you could potentially worry about, right? Is that you get one of those games, you get a game like this, and you go, well, this is fine for 3 or 4 plays, and then I've seen everything, and everything is just kind of the same, and there's no difference, and I need the expansion to make it that much better. I'm looking at you, Dominion, or Marvel Legendary, or something along those lines. This doesn't suffer from that problem. This game does not make me go, oh, you know what, I've played it 3 or 4 times, I'm going to need an expansion right away. It doesn't. And that's notable. The battling itself in the actual arenas is interesting because you exhaust the heroes, but if everyone is exhausted and you have no more moves on either side, then they all get unexhausted. So who you're choosing to knock out and in what order really matters. Do you take out the super powerful guy that your opponent used, who is already exhausted, who may not get another chance anytime soon? Or do you take out the one that is waiting in the wings to attack next to try and prevent damage in the first place? Were you able to successfully reserve the cards that you needed tactics-wise in the reserve so that you can buy them back with the coins that you have been saving up? Because also, interesting mechanic here is you have the coin cards that you are playing each turn that allow you to buy things, but you also have a physical coin that allows you to have money separated in a savings account, essentially, to be used during any potential time where you can buy things. Whether that is entering a gladiator late after combat has already started to bribe your way in, or to pay to get those tactics cards into your hand when you truly need them during the arena phase. Because otherwise, if they were in your hand before it, you would be discarding them because you discard all of your cards that are left in your hand at the end of your turn before you check to see if the arena happens. The only thing I worry about with champions, with those added aspects, is it going to do too much? Is the champions going to make it too complicated? Because also, playing this is not, especially if it goes back and forth between one player and the other, like my wife and I did when we played it. You know, it wasn't just like 5-0 glory and then, you know, way off in head and game shortened from that standpoint, is that it is a little bit of a lengthier game. It is. A game like this could easily take you an hour, especially the first time, and especially, or even a little bit more, if things go back and forth, and if you add a champions, if you add a degree of difficulty, a degree of complexity, it could go even longer. And are you okay with playing a 2-player card game head-to-head for that long? Do you have the patience for it? That would be the main question. The other one that goes right along with that, going back to what my wife said about this, was that when you have all of the cards out for your patrons, when you've got all of your cards out in your hand, when you've got all of the gladiator abilities, when you've got all of your arena abilities, when you're trying to remember all 9 of the cards that are potentially out and looking at them between rounds, seeing which ones am I actually going for and which ones are going to synergize well, that's a lot of information. And that was her biggest critique and her biggest criticism, was there's just too much stuff sometimes. And so with these longer games, you know, you have 5 or 6 patrons out there with all of the other aspects, because, okay, this patron I have to tap and exhaust to do 1 damage. Well, this one is actually the one that I have to discard a card from my hand to prevent 1 damage. This one is the one that gives them all +1 attack this round. You know, it's remembering all of those things and remembering the order in which to use them and how you want to use them, and the clever mechanism of having enough patrons active to support the number of gladiators, because they each have a required amount of influence in terms of gladiators that the patrons have to be able to support, and if you don't, then you automatically lose the gladiators. So there's a lot going on, and if you're looking for a lighter romp in the deck building aspect, this isn't that. And you know what? It's probably better that it isn't. I would argue that it's probably an overall better game because they said, you know what, we want to make this a little hardier. We want to make this a little bit deeper in terms of what it is. And it may scare off the crowd that's looking for something super simple or super straightforward to get to the table and less overhead, when with less, you know, thinking on each turn about how you're going to strategize as well as make the most of your turn itself. But for those times you're playing it, it's sort of a good tingling, brain burning wise up here. At least from my personal taste as someone who enjoys deck building, to make it a little bit different from the rote and the rinse and repeat that we see elsewhere. Because that's the question nowadays, right? Why am I getting this game? Why am I getting this game over something else? What makes this game different? Well, those are the things that make this game different. I'll tell you that straightforward. I'd probably argue that I'd still like to play this either solo or 1 or 2 player. I always worry about the dynamics of a 3 and 4 player game when a 2-player game is made into them. And so if you're looking for 3 or 4, I'm not sure I'm qualified to speak as well on that side of things. I didn't play it at the 3 or 4, but those are my concerns in general whenever I see that sort of transition there. So that's what you need to know. This is a game that is getting a second printing of a good game. You're not going to be disappointed. This is not one of those games that is all of a sudden coming out of nowhere, getting hype, and then going to fail to deliver on that side of things. It's got 130,000+ raised, not because of those quotes, but because the game is really actually freaking solid. The basement is low, the ceiling is much higher. So there's not a question of if you're going to get a good game. I will flat out say that as a review of just the base game, this is a great game. There's no question about that. It's whether it's a great game for you, if you like those things, if you're looking for that realm of things within your type of game. There you go. For Glory, Champions expansion, little bit of thoughts, little bit of everything. Value-wise, if you're interested, it does look like the Champions expansion is giving a Legends expansion for free on there. And again, if you're going to give free expansions, that tends to be where the value is on Kickstarter nowadays. Otherwise, you might be better off waiting for retail. But, I mean, it's a good game. It's a good game, folks. If you like this sort of thing and you're looking for something new and different, this is going to strike thematically differently, strategically and tactically differently, and just the overall phasing in the mechanism and the combat versus deck building phases and how they interact differently than anything else out there that I've played. So, if that interests you, check it out. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Thank you for putting up with me. Thank you, Spielcraft, for sending me a copy of this to check out in the first place. As always, stay classy. Thanks for watching. I'll see you around.